Welcome to La Cura Podcast. I'm your host, Francisca Porchas Coronado. La Cura will take you on a journey at the intersection of health, healing, and social justice. We will engage in conversations about decolonizing our health and reclaiming traditional ways of well-being and healing. We will explore and honor our multiple identities, cultures, traditions, and remedios. This offering is brought to you by Mi Gente, a political home of Latinx and Chicanx people that is pro-Black, pro-woman, pro-poor, pro-queer, because our communities are all that and more. Hey team! Thanks for listening to La Cura today, wherever you are, whatever day it is, whatever time it is. I appreciate you for downloading today. I am joined by a powerful healer whose name is Rocio Navarro. She is a healing artist that works intimately and creatively with water, a vaginal steam hydrotherapist, a ceremonialist, spiritual counselor, energy and sound healer with a sociology degree background. Born and raised in LA, the daughter of migrant parents from Michoacan, Mexico, her practice stems from indigenous-based healing, epigenetics, and women's wholeness medicine using water healing techniques to support personal transformation, grief work, sexual trauma, ancestor connection, and womb healing. So Rocio, good to have you. Tell us a bit more about how you got into this powerful work of using water as an element to heal.
I've always been interested in holistic and alternative medicine since I was really, really young. And in my early 20s, when I was in college, I was doing a lot of work with Native communities in Mexico and in the US, and learning about cultural and healing methods that they were using in their communities. And we were doing these exchange programs. And then I was learning with another alternative medicine practitioner, and just learning different methods along the way. But my main focus was education at that time. And in the midst of that, I was going through a lot of personal healing and iterations in my life. And a lot of my early childhood kind of wounding came up really vastly during that time. I was severely depressed, and I was going through a stage where suicidal ideations was a big part of my life. And in 2010, literally my life started kind of transforming. And so I ended up listening to this dream, because dreams have been a huge part of my healing journey. And the dream was very clear, and it said that I needed to go back to the motherland. And I did. And so in that process, I ended up down in Guatemala, traveling without knowing, going through the Mayan route, had bought a one-way ticket, and ended up in Guatemala. And I ended up staying there for about 10 months the first time, studying at this metaphysics meditation center, where I learned a lot of different healing modalities in relationship to the tree of life, and majority, literally, I felt like that was a container that really opened up more of my healing abilities. I was in a bout of silence for 50 days, and that really took me through a metamorphosis. And it was during that time that I was also getting I was getting visions and in my dreams that I would be birthing people in water. And so at that time, I thought, great, I'm going to go into midwifery. It seemed like a natural path for me, since I was already around a lot of midwives here in LA and in the doula world. And what I realized later was that 9 months after I came out of that process, and I was living by the beach in the ocean and kind of learning from the ocean also, I came across the water path, and I did my first training. And later I realized that basically all that information, all the premonitions that I was having, was that I would be taking people through birthing processes through the water, that it wasn't actually midwifery. So that was really my first time of coming across the water path. And ever since then, I've just kind of deepened my relationship and my practice to it. And it's kind of morphing into many other iterations. So really, it was my first kind of, I would say, exploration to be fully embodied in something, because given my history with trauma as well and childhood trauma, like the water was like what I needed to begin that like embodiment. And so it has been a whole metamorphosis in itself. And I can, tell you millions of stories of how that has shifted my life. But, just to sum up, that's been kind of the journey that I took and how it revealed itself to me and why I'm here right now, still learning from that path.
Which also sometimes requires a lot of vulnerability and can be a very hard thing for people to do as well. That's why I think oftentimes children and very young people have a much easier time with that, because as we grow older, we get in our own way. We can't fully lean into curiosity because it feels kind of silly or weird or scary. And then suspending doubt is really hard because we can often be overwhelmed by it in so many different places in our lives. And so that's beautiful. I think it's also some advice for all of us who, I think many of us who might be listening to this podcast or trying to figure out their path or their way, or whether it's healing or whether it's, whatever your purpose is. I think both those things. And then there's that little voice, right? That little voice that leads you, and it doesn't speak, it doesn't speak our language necessarily. It doesn't look or feel like or sound like another person, but being able to identify it is actually a real gift. Tell us about what are the different ways that you work with people in the water, what the forms that the healing takes.
There's so many different ways, and that's the beauty of this work. And that's the beauty for me about the elements and working with something so primal. And I'm still incredibly fascinated by the water in itself. Just because she's such it's the encompassing element. I'll share first how I started working with water, and then I'll give iterations of how I continue to use water. So when I came across this particular path, I started doing, and I still do, somatic healing with water. And what that meant, or what that means, is that you basically take someone in body temperature water, and there's subtle stretches and manipulation of the body as the body is essentially floating and being held in the water. It's also the very first time, perhaps in a long time, that the body doesn't feel as much compression. And so what I loved about doing this work, and what I love about doing that particular type of work, is that on the somatics and on the nervous system level, it goes a lot deeper. Because again, our body is so used to being on land and feeling that compression. And when you are held by somebody else in the water, and that part of your brain that is constantly actively paying attention to the compression, even when you're in a hyper relaxed state, it starts to let go. And so it starts to unwind, and you start to unravel the nervous system in such a profound way, because it's not feeling that compression as much. And because we're working with the water, we're working with the memory of the subconscious. And so what ends up kind of getting revealed, even in one session, is pretty profound for people. It's almost like having various, sessions in one, because you're immersing the body you're submerging the body in literally the amniotic fluid of life, and you are allowing the nervous system to do what it needs to do at the same time that the person is recalling and retrieving information from the subconscious and the unconscious, and from the cellular memory that is in the body. So I found that to be really potent and pivotal, and that's the reason why I ended up doing this work, because when I had gone through my experiences being in bouts of silence and getting into these altered states of consciousness, I came across the water path. I said, oh my goodness, this is an opportunity to take people directly and give them a doorway to access, where it doesn't have to take 50 days of silence, or it doesn't have to take that much longer to be able to open up that door. And that's the reason why I got into this work, because I had, something to reflect back on, and having gone through my experiences, I was able to, understand that this was just another opportunity. And I didn't get into this work because I wanted to, create a practice out of it. I was just fascinated by what it was doing to me and what I was kind of realizing. And you mentioned the curiosity that healers in sustaining that the curiosity to be able to expand, that was a curiosity that I went into, and that has brought me to this state right now.
I am training in somatic healing, and for those folks who might be listening who might not necessarily know what that is, it's many things, but the belief that our bodies and our tissues outside of the cognitive, like brain part of ourselves, but more like our sensing self, really holds most of the information in our body. But on a healing sort of level, it means that our bodies hold a lot of our stories, both ancestral and our stories from this lifetime, our traumas, our longings, our resilience, and that it's energy, that we're pure energy, and that sort of is something that has to continuously flow, and that many times because of trauma, it can get lodged in our bodies. And healing work, both perhaps in the water, or like in the water, like Rocio is naming, or touch work, or, other types of psychosomatic work, can help you really shift and move that energy along and take on a new shape, a new way, a new practice, embody a new self in the best ways possible. Who's ever jumped in a pool or in a river or in the ocean feels like they weigh, I don't know, very little. No matter how much you weigh, you feel like you weigh, 80% less, and you float and you feel like you are being held. You feel like the ocean itself has taken a lot of weight off of you, both spiritually and physically. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. I've had 3 children, and so I feel like water is so vital to creation. All of creation, both the one we understand now here that we're navigating the world, and also, where we all came from.
Apart from the physical kind of support that happens in the water when we're in body temperature, and I talked about, what happens with the nervous system as you're kind of unwinding in a space that doesn't feel compression. So essentially, that's how I kind of got into this work. And what I realized that as I was developing my practice, that really the message was around the teachings of the water. And so it wasn't necessarily the physical work in the water, but it was like, how does the water, what does it represent? What does it show us? How do we connect to water in all these different levels? And so what ended up kind of unfolding through my practice was that really when we're working with water, we're working with the unconscious. We're working with feeling. We're working with the somatics of the body. We're working with memory. And that's everything. That's literally everything. That's the reason why that saying, water is life. Literally, we come from that water. We gestate in that water. We are majority that water. And so there's so many different ways to be able to have access to that memory that's in us. And so the way that I work with water is that I also do vaginal steam work. I started doing vaginal steam work years ago. And then actually I had been training with people and midwives in different countries. And then Kelly Garza, who is the founder of Steamy Chick, I ended up doing one of her trainings like 5 years ago. And I realized in that moment, I was like, this is another way to connect to water, because it's the vapor, the steam with the herbs moving into our uterine memory is how we awaken and dispel and heal the central piece that is so pivotal for female bodies. And so that was another big realization along the process. So I work with that. I work with sound. I do a lot of sound healing. I do a lot of process work and coaching, and always invoking truly the teachings of the water, so that people understand that there's so many other different ways to connect to it. And it's not just like me taking you into a pool. It's how do you connect to that memory and the unconscious patterns from which you come from. And so my work is a little kind of encompassing in different ways. And there's, like I said, there's mentorship. I do vaginal steam work. I do kind of programs and processes for people depending on where they're at and how they want to develop. I do a lot of dream work because that's been pivotal in my experience, and that for me is also an opportunity to tap into the unconscious, which is the memory that's there. And water is so pivotal. Whenever I realized when I was working with people in the water that their dreams get amplified, and that for me is like, yes, that we get to sever the things that are inhibiting that recall or that awareness, and then that kind of memory starts to get ignited, and there's a lot of opportunity to understand ourselves, a lot more through dream work. So that's been another realm that I've been kind of helping people and supporting people through my practice over the years, and mostly really it's been through my own practice, my own unveiling. And those tools I just share with people the best way that I can. So literally it's threading the water in ways that we can connect to in different forms.
Is some of that dream work, does that happen in the water as well, or is that sort of separate?
That's separate. I mean, usually when I have worked with people in the water, of course, like I usually do integration work, because I know that the waters, whenever I go through and I have experiences with people, I am really, really big on integration. There's many reasons for that. I think a lot of times we move into experiences and we go through those experiences thinking that that's the thing that's going to help us. And it is. But I find that that's always just the doorway, and that the real work and the revelation happens after. And so what I find is that, as an example, if I'm working with somebody in the water, the integration work or the information around dreams happens after. Or sometimes people start to dream about the water or things that start to get revealed before they actually have a session with me. So it almost happens pretty frequently where people say yes to working with me or working with the water in some way, and those dreams will start to happen. So it's almost like once you say yes to that starts to work through them. And so there's piecework that happens as we move along. And that's been really powerful for me as well. And to help and support people through that process.
I really also love what you said about I think you said a uterine memory. And that is also really powerful. I think for all the people who have uteruses and have different relationships with that uterus, have had long journeys. I mean, all of our lives, right? For the folks who have uteruses, but journeys that might have been really complicated, where you might have resented your uterus for different reasons, or where it might have been there and it's just a thing like you don't ever think about or pay attention to, or that you might be carrying a lot of ancestral trauma and from all types, violence and loss, and also feels like really important work. And I'm curious, after these vaginal steams, do folks also have revelations or breakthroughs?
Majority of the time, like, people have deep revelations, and they start to kind of, if they didn't have a connection, or they start developing a connection to their womb, it really opens up that field. And that's why when I see people going through that, I'm like, this is great. This is an opportunity. It doesn't always feel comfortable, but there's work to excavate there. It's literally, we just entered the cave. It's the cave of that darkness, that we actually come from. And there's so much there. And we're just excavating the memory of that so that we can reframe that story and connect to our bodies a lot more. And honestly, I feel that the time that we're in, and this is the reason why I'm really humbled and honored to work with the water, is that, we have come from, especially in the Western culture, it's a very energy upwards kind of culture, meaning that we honor us living, and we reinforce intelligence and our connection to our mind in some way. But what ended up happening over time is that there's been a severing to the intelligence of the body. And so I almost feel like this opportunity right now is asking us, like, let's bridge into the feminine energy, which is just the feminine energy, not non-gendered way, but it's just like ground into your body, ground into the systems that connect you into this earth. We've tended to explore the universe, and we have curiosity about what's outside of us, and we've been doing that. But the invitation right now is go into the darkness, go into the womb, go into the memory and the knowledge and the wisdom of your body. There's so much there. And that's the feminine energy, I feel. And that's the reason why the water, I feel like, we're hearing so much about it. There's been so much struggles in the last couple decades around just what the water symbolizes, and we're going to continue seeing that. But that's the invitation. She's just showing us as an element, this is what we need to work on. This is what we need to rebirth. We need to rebirth ourselves in a more integral way if we choose to listen.
I'm also really curious about, as a healer yourself, I don't know if you call yourself that, or, many people don't like the term, others love it. What has been transformation for you? Like, how has this work transformed you?
I have an interesting relationship with the term healer, and I think a lot of healers do, and it's an evolution. I do define myself as a healing artist, and I know that that's going to continue morphing, but I think the artistry as a healer is that, and healers traditionally have also come from very kind of traditions that have been passed down, and there's a culture and a structure around it. And I think, given the context of modern culture and society, there's not that there isn't a lot of that. A lot of cultures have been preserved, and this information has been passed down. Hence why, we're also here. But the artistry for me is the ability to create and transform and paint this canvas that is also expansive and new and gives inspiration for a new paradigm, and so I see this work being that. But the journey into this work has been, it has been in the darkness for me. I mean, I'm coming into a 10-year cycle where I first kind of dove deep into my process in 2011, and I was having a really hard time during that time. I had deep suicidal ideation during that time. I was severely depressed, and my life had to transform. And I listened. Literally, it was a dream that kind of inspired this journey that I went on without knowing. Like, I literally just listened to this dream, and I knew it was a calling, and I went into the abyss, not knowing what my life would, turn out to be. And so in that process, it's been a lot of excavating around deep childhood wounding that is still moving itself through in my life, and reconciling in some way. The recollection of past life memories and what those imprints also mean, and what they continue to mean in my life right now. As we move deeper into our practice, and mind you, I didn't really choose this path. This path revealed itself through me, and it continues to do that. I didn't choose to be a water healer. I didn't choose that. I just saw life bringing me information. And so it's been a deep challenge, but I'm always challenged to go deeper into my excavation of self. And so, why I decided to say yes to the water was because after coming out of my bout of silence and seeing that there was revelations that I would end up doing this work, and when I came across it and I saw the impact and the doorway and the access that you have when you're able to have that type of healing, I said, this is what I need to share, because people don't need to go through the journey that I just went through. People don't have to sit in silence for 50 days. People don't have to go through these extreme experiences. Just one access to the water in this way that is so embodied is the opportunity to enter a deeper process. And so, as I moved through that, I can share so many stories and details about how challenging it's been for me the last 10 years. But those challenges are only helping me refine who I am. And steam work has been incredible. Just working with the water, with people, immersing myself constantly, being around water, and like cultivating that life for me has been a blessing. Not always easy, but it's a blessing. There's so much richness there. And we can spend hours, just talking about that, because there's been so much revelation in that process for me. And that's why I just want to invite people to do, because that's there for you too. It's your exploration to the invitation into the cave to find out what's really there. And a lot of times we allude to wanting to bypass the pain or going into the cave and getting into these altered states of feeling. But for me, it's like we can get there if we are able to transcend them. And we transcend them by going into the invitation of those places that don't feel comfortable all the time.
We are incredibly grateful to Rocio Navarro for joining us in conversation this week. To learn more about her beautiful work, you can visit rocionavarro.org. Also, follow her on Instagram at water_healing. Please make sure to click on like for this episode and share it with your friends and community. Subscribe to our pod to make sure you receive the latest episode as soon as it drops. For this week's Mística y Medicina, I would like to share a short and simple water ritual. In my tradition of Ifa, we believe in the power of water, so much so that there are several deities that represent different forms that the water takes, such as rain, the lagoon, ocean, and the river. Among them are Orishas Olokun, Oshun, Jemoja, Oya, Olosa, Shango, among others. We also often pray into the water to bring coolness to a prayer, a ritual, a space, or a person's head. For this simple ritual, all you need to do is get a cup of water. Our breath holds a lot of power. and it is the representation of our spirits here in the world, of the energy that is divine, which runs through us, our ability to connect, influence, call in or out, manifest. Hold the cup of water with both hands and bring it close to your face, specifically your mouth. Make sure it is close enough that you can speak into the water. You will speak whatever you want to lovingly remind yourself about yourself. We often can be very hard on ourselves and forget we are the most important person, the one we must love and appreciate the most, the one we must tend to and express the most compassion to. A potential prayer or reminder could be the following. I love me deeply. I'm very proud of myself. I'm grateful for all that I have been given. The more I demand of myself, the more I will give back onto myself. I am loved. I belong. I am enough. After speaking into the water, your prayer, your reminder, your incantation, take a moment and breathe 3 times into the water. Just like that. This water is now medicine. You're going to take it and you're going to drink it. It's going to metabolize into your body and into your spirit. Thank you for listening to La Cura Podcast. The podcast is hosted and produced by me, edited by Lourdes Hernandez. A very special thanks to Phil Circus for all his support and guidance on all aspects of production of this new season for La Cura. Thank you, Phil.